Hello and welcome to round 13 of the Motogp Xtra podcast. Joining me as always is Rhys, also known as Biker Gaming. Now today we have a stacked podcast coming to you. We have issues before the podcast race, we have issues after it. There was plenty going on during the actual race weekend, but we're going to start off with the news that broke for next year on Friday afternoon, I believe it was. Rhys, we're going to get in. We haven't discussed it all weekend. We haven't given our opinions. We haven't said whether we're against or for it. MotoGP will have sprint races in 2023. Now, we'll get into the schedule of it in a second, but we'll just get our initial thoughts. Rhys, what do you make of it?
It's certainly interesting. Very clear that they've gone, oh, look, F1 are doing that, and we already do that with Superbike, so we can just steal that format. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Yeah, I'm kind of for it because, more races is always better, I suppose, for us. I understand the viewpoint that people have said that it's a lot on the riders and stuff like that, but it replaces FP4, so there's no more track time. And again, I do get that a race is not the same as a practice session, so it is a bit more. But World Superbike, they have to do 3 races a weekend, and they're absolutely fine. I'm sure the riders will end up being paid more money because I imagine in their contracts it says if you win a race, probably doesn't specify it has to be a full-length race, so a bit more money for them, more money for, I guess, for the tracks because probably more people could come on Saturday. So yeah, I think it is good. I do. My biggest issue probably is the stats and stuff because it does count as a full race win. So that will probably mess up some of the stuff. But there's already more races than there used to be in a season anyway. So I don't think it ultimately matters too much. And I do like the fact that it doesn't decide the grid because that sometimes can make things a little bit bad. If you fall off in the sprint race, your whole weekend's ruined. But now it's just a sprint race and you start in the same position. So yeah, I think I'm for it overall.
Now, what I've read and what I've been told is that there'll be a separate stats and records for sprint races. It won't go towards your overall career victories.
Oh, well, they're not. Oh, okay.
So
there you go then.
I also had that fear that, not to diss Johnny Ray or anything, but winning sprint races, winning race 1, race 2, all that adds up very quick. And then you look at Rossi's record, you look at Marquez, we could have Jean Mir winning the same amount of races as Danny Pedrosa, but then are they equal? No. But then it can kind of get muddy, so I like the fact they are separating them. They'll also have half points, but we won't be decimal points. I think it is at the moment what they have decided.
Yeah, it's the Superbike system.
Exactly, yes. Superbike system is the best way to put it.
12 to 1, first and 9th, I think it is.
Yeah, so a lot of people are thinking, oh, well, we're going to have 312.5 points for Fabio, 306.5 for Pecco. It just gets messy then. It doesn't look very professional in my opinion, so I'm glad they're not going about it. The point that you mentioned that it won't go towards qualifying is a big thing. The way F1 do it, we'll go to F1 first because they do have it for their qualifying as well as Superbikes, of course, have it as it kind of fast lap. They have a whole different system in Superbike, and I think Superbike does it best because with F1, they're it kind of gives the top 10 are I can't make a mistake now because I'll be outside the top 10. Then you have people like the Aston Martins who are 18th. You go, well, I might as well just send it and see what happens. So it kind of gives a bit of jeopardy to the back teams that can take something out of the top riders and top teams. But thankfully for GP, I like to keep qualifying separate. Qualifying is probably the most excitement of a current GP weekend. So I think it would be terrible if they ruined that by going, oh, here, do a race and we'll take everything from that. So I am a bit more of a traditionalist. I love the way GP was. You build to a race, you've one opportunity at it. Whereas the sprint race, as much as it's been proven that it works, it's kind of oh, well, this is just race 2 now. It's kind of oh, here we go again. Now, whether my opinion will change when I see it, I've always been of the opinion that one race, everybody knows what they got. They give it everything, and if you win, you win. Who can the Valentino Rossi show up on a Sunday kind of mentality? Oh, well, I can win on Saturday now as well. I don't know. I'm on the fence about it. I reckon it will work, but I also have in my head, I believe it'll be like Formula 1 where they won't be able to pass each other as aggressively as we think it will. I don't think the racing will be that spicy just by halving the laps until them go wild. It might make the opening couple of laps a bit more dicey. They won't have to focus too much on tyre wear, whereas that is a big thing at the moment in GP, but it's a lot of question marks, so we'll just have to wait and see till Portimao, who have run 1 next year. So we're going to move in now to Moto 3. Again, not even the weekend. We have Leopard's parts dispute. Now, they are complaining that KTM are using parts that were created after the start of last season. Now, there's a whole technical rule change to make the class more fair. KTM have seemingly got it better than Honda, and Leopard got their nose out of joint, and they took them to the arbitrary court of Motogp. There's a big court case. They lost. What did you make of it, and what did you make of it after watching the Moto3 race, seeing Hondas basically be like a 2007 M1 Yamaha versus Ducatis?
Yeah, it is interesting because it's something that's sort of been going on behind the scenes. No one's actually known about it till Leopard released like a 3-page press release about it. That's how we all found out about it, like that they'd lost this case. And it is interesting because we've been saying all season that the KTM is looking like it's a better bike than the Honda. And to be honest, this was probably the most damning race so far. There was one Honda at the front. And to be honest, that made me more impressed with the rider on it because of how good of a job he was doing. Foggia, I don't want to get into the race too much because obviously we'll talk about that in a bit, but Foggia was not really anywhere. The third highest Honda was like 16th, that was Scott Ogden, so kind of tells you all you need to know that the KTM definitely seems to be better. And as far as I understand, the rule was that you had to homologate parts at the start of last season. You could then upgrade through that season, but for the next season, you could only use the parts you'd homologate at the start. I think it's a cost-cutting thing, and also to bring it a bit close. I think the rule was probably designed to curb Leopard's straight line speed advantage a little bit as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the reason for it. Seems to have worked, but yeah, I would say you can see where they're coming from because the KTM was not this dominant last season. So if you're saying, if you're still using the same bike, then surely this is not the case. But perhaps they've just found something with setup or something like that, and they've not actually had to change any components. So it is interesting, perhaps just the conditions. I do feel like the KTM though does seem like a better bike. So yeah, it is interesting because you can kind of see where they're coming from. But KTM have been cleared, so obviously they're not doing anything wrong. Just it does seem like a very weird performance jump, but I guess if they've been found innocent, then they're innocent.
Yeah, it could be as well. A lot of people are going, well, KTM have made a massive jump. Could be Honda have gone backwards as well. We always say that, you always kind of think if someone else is doing better, it's because they've made a huge step forward. It can sometimes mean they've improved, they've tidied up a few areas, but the others have come back to them, and that's not really been looked at. So, because Honda had such an advantage, and now they've no advantage. For me to believe that KTM have gone from being nowhere in the straight to being quicker and convincingly quicker, I believe that Honda have been hit hard by these new rule changes, which, like you said, were to kind of curve Leopard's absolute incredible, crazy straight line speed. But now it's like they can't even overtake. And as we'll jump into the race in a second, it's whether it's fair or not, I don't know. It's hard to. It's done what they set out to, but they've kind of gone too far the other way now. But we are going to jump into the race. It was a interesting race from lap 1. Of course, this weekend in all 3 classes we have the brand new chicane after the incident in 2020 between Franco Morbidelli and Johann Zarco. So no longer is turn 2 the flat out left corner up to turn 3. It is now a 2A and 2B they called it. I don't know why why it has a letter. It makes no sense to me. So it's a chicane. Now, we've had it on the game a lot longer than the real life riders had it. I hate it on the game. Of course, the game isn't great, so that's probably part of the reason. Most of the riders throughout the classes had positive feedback throughout the weekend about the chicane. Rhys, what did you make of the debut of the chicane before we get into the individual class action?
Well, it was definitely an interesting addition. I mean, it's served its purpose. I think it slowed it down. We did see which race? I think it was Moto2. Somebody crashed at the chicane and their bike sort of slid right back towards the track. I think it was Aldeguer. His bike almost came back on the track. So it does show that kind of incident can still happen there. So perhaps it could be adjusted a bit. The gravel also seemed a bit too deep. I mean, we saw whenever anybody went through it looked really deep. Also, if you saw BT Sport, Neil Hodgson did like sort of track guide before the weekend, and he put his foot in the gravel and showed you how deep it was. He also almost crashed in the gravel doing a bike lap as well later in the weekend, which is quite amusing that he didn't know they had footage of that, and that was quite funny. But yeah, I think the chicane overall kind of, I guess it served its purpose. It didn't really change a lot, I don't think. It probably it just made the lap time slower. I guess. I mean, there wasn't a lot of action there. A few crashes, but especially if we're speaking about Moto3, not really a lot happening on chicane.
Yeah, I still, like, again, now we go back to the chicane, like the Aldeguer incident where he nearly slid across to the apex of the second part. I believe with all of Red Bull's money and all of what they could have done is they could have done something slightly better. It doesn't look right. It's kind of what it reminds me of is when they had that weird chicane in Barcelona where it looked like they stuck it in. It didn't suit the track. It looks obvious that it's not meant to be there. And for me, that's one of the issues I don't really like about it. Now, they still have changed. Like, you could still have a moment going into it and run across and steamroll through the chicane and collide with someone. So it's still not perfect in my opinion. I do understand that Red Bull didn't want to adjust the whole track just for GP because they don't have issues with Formula 1. But I believe there's definitely a better solution than that chicane. It's a bit of a cheap fix, really. Again, it just does not look right. It looks messy. It doesn't look finished, even though it's been done for months. So I'm not hugely impressed by it. Most of the riders said it's better than they expected it by the aerial photos and the imagery they've seen that looked a lot tighter than it was. It does have a decent amount of flow. It added a different aspect to the opening sector. I think it helped in GP, it helped the inline fours more. But in the smaller classes, it didn't really make a huge difference to anyone in particular. It just kind of was a new aspect of the racetrack. But we are now going to jump into the Moto3 race finally after we've covered all the pre-race weekend issues. So we have to start off with Ayumu Sasaki. Of course, he did receive 2 long lap penalties for his crash in Silverstone when he took out one of the Champions leaders, Sergio Garcia. He also knocked himself out in that injury as well, so he's a bit dazed after that. So we were all wondering, would he get a penalty, as Nakagami didn't for a pretty poor move in Catalonia, and kind of the injury card was brought up by him and he didn't get a penalty, whereas Sasaki looked to be clearly knocked out but did get 2 long lap penalties for this weekend. I'll leave it to Rhys to explain his race. Brilliant race for Ayumu. What did you make of his pace overall? If he didn't have the 2 long lap penalties, where do you reckon he would have finished?
Well, I think he would have still won without the long lap penalties. But yeah, it was. He started off well. He got to the front. He took his first long lap penalty, dropped all the way to 20th. So it did seem like it was a really harsh penalty because he lost 20 positions basically. And then he took the second one. We didn't see that at the time, but he didn't seem to lose quite as much with that one. So he probably took it a little bit better. Maybe he was just in a better position as well for actually taking it. So like there was a bit more of a gap behind him or something like that. But then his pace was just amazing. It was one of those races, a bit like a Costa back in Qatar last year or Doha last year. I think it was the Doha GP. And like when he came from the pit lane, when you've got that momentum behind you, if you can make the passes pretty quickly, you just steamroll through the pack because you just keep your pace up, you don't lose your momentum. And that's exactly what Sasaki did. Got his way to the front. And to be honest, I didn't notice until sort of the end of the race when I was looking at the championship standings because they popped up. He's like out of the championship, but if he had a bit more luck, he could have been up there because I was thinking, he's been rapid all season. I'm surprised he's not in the championship hunt, but he missed a race or two, didn't he? He has had a bit of bad luck. He's also made some silly mistakes himself. I think did he take out Mino at Mandalika and also then Garcia at Silverstone, I believe. So he's made a few mistakes, Sasaki, but really good race from him. Great racecraft, great pace going through. 2 long lap penalties and a win. That's fantastic. That doesn't happen the best of times, and it seemed like a pretty harsh penalty as well this week. So he thoroughly deserves that one.
Yeah, he was sublime. And again, you touch on his kind of inconsistencies and his issues throughout the season. He would be there if it wasn't for all the issues he had all season. He's been probably the quickest man all year. You could put the two like Garcia and Guevara. I reckon he's quicker than them, but he just doesn't have the consistency. And of course, consistency wins championships more than outright pace at the times. But he's been in the class a couple of years. He's kind of been no major threat to anyone. And he's got into this Max Racing team on the Husqvarna, and he's just, whatever's happened, it's just clicked. And from Qatar, which he should have won, he had a technical issue in Qatar, which caused him to have a kind of a half high side moment, which then broke his fairing and ended up being a retirement for him. But in that race, he was like seconds in the lead. And again, I asked Rhys there, what would you reckon his road have been if he didn't have the penalty? I reckon he would have cleared off, and you just don't see that in Moto3. You don't see a rider, not since maybe Jorge Martin, where riders can just ride at their own speed and kind of just bridge a gap and not you have to slipstream people to pass. So he is a special talent, and again, it'll probably be next year really before we can talk about a championship hunt. I believe he's 66 points behind the leaders, which at the moment is just a bit too much. Now, if they have another race where maybe they collide with someone else and he wins, you go maybe, but for now, I think it's too much of a stretch for his championship, but he's definitely been incredibly impressive this year. Now, we did briefly touch upon the Hondas at the start of the podcast in Moto3. The one and only Honda that did well, Suzuki, ironically. P2 for most of the race, led on the podium, off the podium, had a massive disadvantage in straight line speed. There was one shot when he came out of the final corner on the back wheel of Ayumu Sasaki and just sat in his slipstream up till turn 1, and he just couldn't even level him, couldn't pull out. What did you make of Tatsuki Suzuki's race, considering Honda's woes?
It was an amazing race from him, actually. I think we said it in the last episode, the last podcast, that we'd agreed that he was now doing enough. At the start of the season, we said he probably wasn't. He was being quite poor. But then we said, yeah, he deserves to keep his ride. And this weekend, again, kind of shows that. Click with him. He's always had the pace. He just is a bit up and down. But yeah, like you say, he had such a huge disadvantage. I mean, the slipstream, he could just about keep with it, which shouldn't really be the case in Moto3. There shouldn't be that much of a power disadvantage. I was thinking about it earlier when we were talking about it. It's almost like when Mahindra and Peugeot were in the championship, their bikes were just nowhere near the Honda or the KTM. Or even the Honda when Moto3 first started, the first version of the Honda, the just I think it was I can't remember the model name now. It's the same, but just without a W on the end, I think. Yeah, that bike, the one, it was nowhere. It was like it was all KTM Cup. Cortese won the first championship, and then Viñales won the next one. Then they brought a new bike, and Alex Marquez won on it straight away. So it's almost like seeing that again, like the old Mahindra or the old Honda against the KTM. It's just not got anything. Like the slipstream was keeping him in it, so it stopped him getting completely passed. But if he didn't have that slipstream, he would have got passed by so many people. It was a massive disadvantage for Suzuki. Great race from him. Like we said, none of the other Hondas were anywhere. I mean, we'll probably come on to Foggia in a second, but he was nowhere. And like I said, Scott Ogden was the third one in 16th. Mino was nowhere. I think he took out Tatai, I believe. There was a collision between the two, I think, because he got a penalty for it, but I don't think we've ever seen it. But yeah, just the Hondas were just nowhere except Suzuki. So amazing ride from Suzuki, to be honest. Definitely. Maybe Sasaki probably still is rider of the day with his long lap penalty, but top two definitely are the top two riders of that race.
Yeah, and we've been harsh on Suzuki, I must say. He's always been a rider I reckon has unbelievable one lap pace regardless of the track. But in the race, he looks like he doesn't seem to be able to do it for 19 laps. And last few laps, touch wood now that in Misano, a track he's won at before, I will add that he doesn't have a mirror after us complimenting him. He just looked like he's been more consistent. Now, I will point out one thing. He was going defensive in a lot of places on laps where you just wouldn't go defensive. It was more the fact that he knew he had such a disadvantage. He did mention it in his post-race interview with Simon Crawford that it was on the edge of being a bit ridiculous, the advantage that the KTM have. And
well, it's probably been told to say that by
yeah, exactly.
if they've got a problem with it.
There's a bonus if you slayed everyone else.
In like an interview before the weekend. So
yeah. So again, they have so much work to do. But going back to Suzuki, he did so well to stick with it and to get home in P2. It was brilliant to see, and I was delighted for him because I have been tough on him in previous Cup all year. Really, I remember when he got that seat, I was like, Jesus, how was he have to get in the best seat in the class? On his genuine form wasn't there, but like you said, he's probably matched Foggia all year really, and probably now he's quicker of the two of them. Foggia is nowhere again. Like we will cover him in a bit, but Suzuki, sublime. I don't think people understand how well he did at a power circuit to come P2 when, like you said, the next Honda was nowhere. There was only one else in the points. You mentioned that the British Talent Cup rider that has escaped my name, Scott Ogden, he finished P16 but got demoted to P21 because of a track limits warning on the last lap. So
yeah,
that's 3 Hondas in the top 21 positions. That is not going to sit well in Japan. So I'd imagine something will happen. Always in these classes, they kind of have, it's very rare that they're both equal. It's usually KTM have the upper hand or Honda have the upper hand. So I reckon it will swing back. The pendulum will swing back towards Honda soon. I don't think they can keep this up, having it this one-sided, because it is a KTM. It is Red Bull rookies. Like, it's the Red Bull KTM Cup at the moment. So I'd imagine
there's about a million Red Bull KTM bikes in them now. So
yeah, that is part of the problem. But anyway, it will change in the future race, I believe. But we did briefly touch on Foggia there. His season has a massive asterisk and a question mark next to it. What do you reckon is going wrong? Do you reckon he's out of the title hunt now after a poor race again?
Say so. I mean, I think we kind of already thought he was out of it, but then with the two gases not finishing the last race and him winning, he brought himself back into it. But it's just got Foggia written all over it. This is the problem. Everybody, we all thought coming into this season that he'd win the championship, because we all remember his amazing second half of the season where he was winning races, really clicked with it, and Acosta was sort of probably cracking under the pressure a little bit. But there was a reason why he was 100 points behind him, because he didn't, I'm pretty sure he scored no points on the first 3 races or something like that. He would either finish first or second, or then just crash, or be 17th. He was constantly up and down. It was just that second half of the season he was really good. And again, I guess we're seeing that to some extent. Some weekends he's just nowhere. We saw it back in Jerez. He was nowhere. He was nowhere here. Again, it's nothing new. Like I said, last season it happened, but then also the season before when him and Jorge Macia, Yama Macia, were teammates. Macia was clearly the quicker of the two, by a way, and they were both kind of a bit all over the place. But by the end of the season, Macia was there fighting for wins, but Foggia still wasn't. I don't know if Foggia actually did end up winning a race that season, but he was pretty much nowhere the whole season. He just popped up maybe once or twice. So it's a bit of a Foggia trait, and I imagine the exasperation of the Honda doesn't help. So maybe it would be a bit of an off weekend. Perhaps he'd be just in the top 10, but because the bike is so bad, him being off, he's miles behind. But yeah, definitely, I'd say the end of his title charge. I think it's the two gases that's between, really. I mean, it's a superior bike, probably the superior riders on it also. So yeah, I can't really see it going anywhere else.
Yeah, it is a common trend of Foggia is just too inconsistent to mount a challenge. He is rumoured to be moving up next year to the Italtrans team, I believe. So this could be his last chance at the title in Moto3, and it's pretty much slipped already at this point. Like I said, last time out in Silverstone, we were kind of oh well, maybe he'll start to kind of a similar trend to last year where he'll go on a run towards the end, but they both beat him again today, and he looked like, well, I didn't see him once on the camera, so he obviously has some serious issues going this season. But we're going to move on now to the gases. Garcia getting aggressive with Guevara. The title is getting close between them. I actually believe that it'll be between the two of them, and third will be Ayumu. I don't believe Foggia will be top 3 in the championship at this rate. So it'll be just how big of the gap is between second and third, because these guys are going down to Valencia. You can just feel it. What did you make of Garcia's race up against his teammate?
You can tell that it's getting a bit more tense now. Some of the moves are getting a bit more aggressive. I think there was 2 laps in a row that Garcia dived it up the inside into the last corner, and Guevara sort of set him up a bit. I mean, it was okay. It wasn't over the line or anything, but it's the kind of move you wouldn't tend to pull on your teammate. And I guess it's becoming that point now where he's not his teammate anymore; it's his championship rival. I don't know whether they get on or whatever. Personally, I don't know that. That could also play into it if they don't, for whatever reason. But yeah, you can tell it's definitely heating up between the two of them. Hopefully, we'll see it a little bit more for the race win. But it is interesting that they've kind of both been a bit off the boil the last 2 races, which is a little bit weird. Now, I think in Silverstone, to be fair, they were just sitting back in the group a little bit and kind of just trying to come through at the end, and then they both got took out. But in this race, Guevara had been struggling all weekend, did lead very briefly, sort of dropped back a bit, but they just couldn't run with the pace that Sasaki was doing, and Onshu and Suzuki and David Munoz, the top 4 riders, they just couldn't live with that pace. So it did seem a little bit weird. The two gases were struggling so much, and probably them taking lumps out of each other probably didn't help, but it's definitely hotting up between them now. The points gap still very, very small, so yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens next time in Misano, whether they'll bounce back and be fighting for the win again, or whether they'll hold each other up too much.
I reckon at some point between now and Valencia, we're going to see a moment where they will clash and they will boil over. I reckon it's building and building and building. Garcia is so aggressive, and even more so towards his teammate. Guevara is more of a Lorenzo type rider. He likes to be at the front, high corner speed, make the gap hit that way. Garcia is a brawler, a Rossi, a Marquez, likes to get his hands dirty and get dug in. So I reckon we could see a race where Guevara has slight more pace, is trying to make a gap, and Garcia is hanging on to him and forcing moves on him, and I reckon we could see explosions. I just get the feeling that it's building to something, and it will be big for the title. But we are now going to move on to the intermediate class Moto2. Now, this one was interesting from start to finish. Riders going forward, coming back, some of the title favourites starting lower, some of the title favourites at the front not showing pace, some of the title favourites looking like they're going to win the race from lap 1. We're going to start with Vietti, championship over now, has to be, crashing while closing in on the two Idemitsu Honda riders. He was on the back of Chantra and he literally looked like he got in a bit too deep. The bike chattered, crashed out, lost the championship lead last time out, lost the Frontier. Is that the championship lost for the Italian?
I'd say so, but then this championship keeps taking turns. I mean, we looked at how bad Augusto Fernandez's start to the season was, for example, all the crashes he had. Then we thought he was going to start running away with it. Then he wasn't quite as on it this weekend. We'll talk about that later, but it's hard to say. I mean, Vietti, yeah, he's lost a bit of a gap, but who's to say that Iagora doesn't crash in the next race or Augusto Fernandez doesn't crash in the next race? So he's still there or thereabouts. But yeah, it is starting to look a little bit more unlikely. I think out of the three, he's the least likely. I mean, I guess that makes sense because it's the points total, but he's the one that seems a bit more vulnerable, a bit more, likely to make a mistake because he got a warning. I'm pretty sure he had a bit of chatter into the previous turn, the chicane turned into turn 2A, I think. He sort of lost the front a bit there. And then, yeah, he almost hit Chantra. But he'd got the pace. There was no need for him to be pushing that hard up to the back of Chantra. He had plenty of laps. He just caught him up. He literally just got onto the back wheel of them and then crashed immediately. Like, pretty much just caught them in that corner and then crashed. So it was a bit needless. It's not the first mistake we've seen from him. It's the first time we've seen him properly back on the pace for a few weekends. So I don't know whether maybe he was, well, I say for a few weekends, he was kind of nowhere till the race, but that is sort of his MO. But the first sort of time I've seen him back on the pace in a race for a while, and maybe he's just getting desperate because he knows he's falling back in the championship, but he definitely did he didn't do himself any favours there. I think, it's not 100% out of question yet because, like I said, there could be a crash for one of the other contenders. But yeah, he's definitely making it more difficult for himself. But to be fair, no one really expected him to even fight for the championship this year because we just thought he'd have another good building year. So maybe he can focus on just trying to get some more wins maybe towards the end of the season, focus on next year's championship or something. But he's not out of it 100% yet.
You forget as well, he's only just 20 years old, so he's quite young even for the Moto2 class. He definitely has a few more years there. I kind of look at him like he just needs to get his qualifying set. There's a lot of times he starts the race far back where he has to override to get there. If he could start P5 or above, he could just he could sit in there and just kind of work the tyres, work off a bit of fuel load, not have to be going right. I'm in P12 now, I have to be P5 before the last 10 laps so I can actually get to the leaders. He always gives himself so much work to do, and that's kind of his story of a season, that a lot of times he just gets there and it was a great race for him, but he's putting himself under so much workload and so much stress and pressure to get there that if he could just get his Saturdays right, get himself in the right area, he's shown that on a Sunday he can perform, and then he won't have to do these stupid mistakes where he has to come from P6, P7, past 5 riders just to get there, and then maybe his tyre's gone off and he's still over the limit and all these small mistakes. But like I said, he's young, and I reckon he will be he'll be wickedly quick next year. But I agree, he's probably the least likely out of the three now to take this championship. We're going to move on now to the actual podium. It was Iagora who won it. We had his teammate Chantra in P2, and it was Britain's Jake Dixon who rounded off P3 in the final corner, squaring off a beautiful move on Pedro Costa, who came back this weekend from a broken femur, different bone, and showed great pace really, and didn't fatigue at all very much in the race. Everyone kind of predicted that half race distance he'll go backwards, a bit like Canet did in previous races after his accident in before Assen. So brilliant result for pretty much all of the top three. Iagora taking the win, brilliant for his championship. It was good to see Chantra back up there. Dixon, another podium. I believe that's his third in a row. I could be wrong in saying that.
Yeah, it is.
And to see Pedro Acosta back there beating his championship chasing teammate. What did you make of the top four, we'll say, just to round in Pedro Acosta?
Yeah, I was really impressed by them. It was difficult to... I didn't know who I really wanted to end up on the podium. Obviously, I wanted Dixon to do it because I'm British, but then at the same time, I really liked Pedro Acosta, and he was coming back from injury. So I really wanted him to get on the podium. So it was tough to watch, but Pedro did such a good job. I mean, it was an amazing performance from him because he hasn't ridden the bike since before the summer break. Because obviously he crashed before Assen, so he wasn't even in Assen, and then there was obviously the long break. He then couldn't do Silverstone because he didn't pass the fitness test. And then this time he could finally race here again. But he was building up some momentum. The last race he had done previously, Saxon Ring, he'd finished second. Before that, obviously, he'd already won a race back at Mugello. So he was building his form. And he seemed to sort of pick up from where he left off, which is nice. He's not struggling like he was at the start of the season. So he can probably just try and get a few more wins towards the end of the season. Probably have to help his teammate a little bit, I would have thought. I feel like that would be the IO way. It also helps with his standing in the team, so I'm sure he probably will help if he's told to. And then, try and build up some momentum, and just probably go into next season, probably go in as favourite if he ends it well. So, yeah, we'll have to see with Acosta, but it was a good performance for him. Good performance from Dixon as well, because Dixon was running up there. Got a bit of a false neutral, which seems to apparently just happen to British riders all the time, because Sam Lowe's has done that a few times in the past as well at that same corner. I think he skipped a lot Chantra and Navarro there a few years ago. But yeah, he dropped back, but then he didn't panic. So I've got a lot of faith in Jake now. I mean, the last few races, he's had a little bit of adversity in some of them and managed to come back. So yeah, really good ride for him. Really good ride for Pedro as well. And to be fair, Fernandez... damage limitation, he could well have crashed trying to get something higher. So yeah, overall the guys battling for the podium all did fairly decent rides.
Yeah, and you just touched on Fernandez's struggles there. He just gone off the ball. He was down in P8 at one point in this race. Thankfully for him, Vietti crashing out gave an extra position, but he didn't look strong. Then Canet had a mistake on backwards. Then he got repassed by Canet. He didn't seem to have the pace. The only time he was going forwards and others made mistakes. It's a bit of a weird one. The last couple of rounds where he's won, he's literally looked like a warrior. He looked so determined, just absolutely clearing off. He had so much pace. And then this weekend, he looked like he was struggling to keep in the top 10 almost. He was kind of struggling for pace so much. So it's very weird that way, the way it's gone back and forth, the championship. The other two championships, so to say, have kind of defined winners and defined championship challengers, whereas these three, from week to week, are kind of going in a weird circle of this week I'll be kind of on it, or next week I'll be a bit out of it, and there's no real one rider that's grabbed the championship by the neck and it's like, this is my title, this is my year where I'm going to make sure of it. So it's a bit of a weird one, but we are going to move on now to the Inimitsu battle. We did touch on them both, finished on the podium. Chantra pulled in Iagora with about 5 laps to go, and their battle right to the final corner was epic, and it was a great pass and an even better repass from Iagora. What did you make of them battling and Chantra being back up there for the first time since Le Mans?
It was nice to see Chantra back up there, because it was nice to see him at the start of the season, to be honest. A guy that's been around the paddock for a while, probably would have been, if he hadn't had a good season, probably his last chance. If we're being honest, I probably would have got rid of him if he hadn't done too well this season. I think he's obviously warranted to keep that ride now. But yeah, it was nice to see him back up there. He's always been good at Austria. He's performed there in the past. Obviously, I think when he was on the stop and go, I think he put it like right up on the front row once. So, he's kind of always, there. He's pretty good. Like he's always been pretty good at this circuit. He's shown some good form this weekend, this season. Sorry. And yeah, he just managed to catch up to Agora at the end. He pulled what was a pretty good pass, but just ran a little bit wide. Agora managed to get back underneath him, but it must have been hard to watch for Rhys I in the pit box there to see Chantra just closing in on Agora. So they're two riders, 1-2. They wanted to bring that 1-2 home, and to be fair to them, that's probably the order they also want it to be in. They need Agora to win for the championship, as much as I'm sure they wouldn't mind, really, if Chantra won again. I'm sure they know that Agora needs to win. And yeah, I guess it panned out for them in the best because they both finished and they got it in the order that's best for them in the Riders' Championship. But good riding for the pair of them. Got to say, fair play to Chantra for giving it a go, because a lot of people would have probably just sat there and thought, oh, it's my teammate. And he didn't do anything dirty either. He went for a clean move, ran a bit wide, but last lap, come on, you got to go for it. So yeah, it was a nice battle. It's not very often you see a Moto2 race go down to the last corner, and then we got two battles for the last corner in the same race. We got the battle for first and the battle for third. So yeah, it was a pretty cracking little battle, pretty cracking Moto2 race, really.
Before we move on to the Premier Class race, who do you think right now is the man for the Moto2 title? We've mentioned that all three of them are inconsistent. If you had to put one name for the title now before we go to Misano and then the flyovers, who do you reckon is who would you put your money on?
Oh, it is difficult because, yeah, we say that they're kind of all over the place. Agora's now leading it again. I don't know, in terms of consistency, my money's with Agora because he's not really had so many off weekends. He's probably just had more weekends where he's been fifth, whereas like Vietti is like one, and then like Fernandez has won. But then they've had races where they've like crashed or they've been like 15th. Whereas I can't really remember Agora having many of those. I know he's had a couple of off weekends, but a lot of the time he's usually like just about there or thereabouts. He doesn't really make too many mistakes, Agora. So if we're talking consistency, my money's with him. But for me, I don't know. Augusto Fernandez with the IO factor, I feel like he's probably got the better package. And when he's on it, no one can beat him. But he's so inconsistent, it's difficult. I think I'll just go with Agora. I think I'll go with Agora, but it is hard to call.
Yeah, I would go Agora. You could have jumped between all three in there for about a minute and a half and then went back to Agora. But I think Agora he's the most consistent, and I reckon out of the three, I think he's the best rider of the three. Now, I do definitely heavily see the IO team factor coming into it, that they are a championship team. They know these running. They know how to win championships. They know how to get their riders across the line. So that will be huge for Augusto. But then you also have Ayama in the Moto2 team for Agora. He's a 250 champion. He's won races. He's done it before. So he'll be there. He'll be on his shoulders. So it's going to be an interesting run-in. But both of us didn't mention Vietti there. So I reckon it's down to now really Agora and Augusto Fernandez. But we are going to move on now to the Premier Class. And all the questions coming into this race was, can the Ducatis be passed by Yamaha on Fabio Quartararo? We had a few question marks coming into the race about his overall pace. We knew he had good pace if the track was empty. There was lots of question marks whether which Ducatis would be quick. There was question marks whether the Aprilias were going to be on it. There was lots of question marks. Austria track is always a bit of a weird one. You never really know what's going to happen. There's always question marks. We started off the race with a huge crash for Jean Mir. Rhys, I believe you have an update on his condition and his right ankle, I believe.
Yes, so he's got some small fractures in his ankle, it turns out, which is not surprising because if you have seen the crash, it was like a 500 monster high side. It was pretty huge. It didn't really get replayed on the TV, which I guess is good because you don't really want to see crashes where people have kind of injured themselves. But like, we didn't really even know what happened because it only sort of caught out of shot. I've only seen it because people have found the clips. I don't know how they found them, but they've got them for whatever reason, like from the TV cams, from different onboard cams and stuff. I don't know whether you can get that with Video Pass or something on the MotoGP website. Yeah, he's got a fracture. He's going to have an MRI tomorrow just to check the actual damage. I think I also read something where it said he might have a bit of ligament damage as well. So not great for him. His season really has been pretty abysmal. Ever since Suzuki announced they're pulling out, they've both been pretty much nowhere. But Mir's pretty much not finished a race since they announced that. which is unlike him. He's not much of a crasher. Feels like he's probably just over pushing the bike. But today, I don't know if that was his fault. I wouldn't be surprised. It was just such a weird place to crash, and the high side was so big. Probably the cold tire, maybe. But I don't know. But that's not been said, so I imagine it's not the case. I imagine it was just rider error, but it did look like a pretty weird high side.
Yeah, it was absolutely monster. You did mention the 500, it just completely let go, and there's a few onboard shots from Aleix Espargaro where you just see him as he comes through the corner, and you just see Mir above everything else in the distance in the sky, and it's a horrific crash, and he instantly put his hand onto his right ankle area, so we kind of did have a feeling early on that it was a big crash and that he did some damage to himself. So we wish him a speedy recovery, and hopefully he'll be back and at least fit in 2 weeks' time in Misano. Bastianini ran wide at the same corner a couple of laps later, more late into the race, more mid-race really, to be honest. We don't have a definite understanding what happened, but from what we heard in pit lane, there was some sort of damage to his front wheel, some sort of dent, bit of a buckle to the front wheel. Now, we don't understand exactly how it happened. Was it from riding? Was it some contact we didn't see? Was it from going through the gravel? But it was a telltale sign that he did have some issue when he came straight into the pits after that run on, even with the rain on the horizon. What did you make of Bastianini's incident, and what did you have a guess at that it was the issue at the time?
Well, it was rather bizarre. I think he ran wide at the chicane, didn't he? As before as well, like a few corners before battling with Martin. So I don't know whether maybe the problem started then, potentially, or whether it was afterwards. But the way he ran on was just so strange. Like, he was nowhere near making the corner. He went all the way to the barrier. He couldn't even get turned before the wall, which is quite rare. Usually they do. Like, they usually manage to get stopped. Like, they've not missed their braking zone by that much. Like, the gravel usually slows them down enough to the point where they can get turned before the wall. But he's had to stop against the wall to not hit it. And then, yeah, he tried to sort of maneuver the bike around, and you could see he couldn't really do that. He was struggling. So, and then he was having a look at the front wheel. So it did imply there was some issue. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there was... well, actually, I would be surprised, because it's very weird to hear like a wheel damage, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the cause of something like that, because he was looking at the front wheel, and the way he went off was really bizarre. But if that's the case, that's a bit worrying, because whoever makes the Ducati wheels, I can't remember which company they use for their wheels, but if there's been a failure, that can't be great. But I know all the Ducati riders use the same ones, so yeah, it's not great for them. It does. So if that was the actual fault, that's quite scary.
Yeah, it is. It's a weird one. You often hear of brakes, kind of brake fade and brake failure, but you'd rarely hear of a wheel kind of collapsing and buckling under its own load. Now, again, we don't have, as the time of recording, a couple of hours after the race, we haven't had any statements saying what had happened, but from reporters in the pit lane that there was damage to the front wheel when he came in after the incident. So a bit of a weird one, a scary one to think, coming down into a deep downhill braking zone and running, like you said, running on so far into the corner that he ended up getting all the way to the barrier and still couldn't stop it before the barrier. Basically had to kind of slide off the bike and catch it before he dropped it, and even at then he didn't look like he could maneuver it, so there was something definitely wrong with the bike. But another team this time struggling all weekend were Aprilia. Maverick looked stronger of the two, ended the race behind his teammate. They never really got going. They were seconds a lap slower at the end of the race. They looked like they had no pace in the race. Maverick had 3 warnings and got a warning for a long lap after 4 laps, which is just unheard of. The commentary team on BT made a point saying that he couldn't really get the bike turned, was running wide everywhere. What did you make of the Aprilia team all weekend and their just lack of pace, really?
I think they were struggling with the rear tyre all weekend by the looks of it. Just the way into every single corner. I mean, Aleix has a weird kind of braking style anyway. If you ever look, he kind of glides the bike in a little bit. But this weekend, the rear was just stepping out so much. You could see it just was not stopping. The same sort of thing was happening with Vinales to kind of a lesser degree. Like, he obviously wasn't stepping the bike out quite as much, but you could see his rear was sort of coming around. And that would probably explain why they couldn't turn the bike also, because they couldn't sort of use the power of the bike to turn with the rear end. Probably why they're struggling a little bit. The Aprilia has been a bike that's looked amazing at pretty much every circuit. except maybe Austin, but then I don't know if that's an Aleix problem more than an Aprilia problem. I don't think he gets on with that circuit at all, but they really struggled here. Like, there's nowhere. Vinales, like you say, he picked up the warning very early, but he was doing pretty well. He had a really good start. He actually gained positions on the first lap, which I never thought I'd say in my life. But then he ran wide a couple of times, and then he really dropped back. I feel like he hit tyre troubles a bit quicker than Aleix did. Aleix probably was taking it a bit steady. It's probably why he was behind Maverick in the first place. But it seemed like Maverick hit some sort of tyre problem, and they both just dropped back quite far. I mean, to be fair, Aleix finished... Did he finish 5th in the end?
I believe so, after
after the Martin crash at the end. So, to be honest, if you run out of tyre, that's not too bad. I mean, obviously, Quartararo finished second, so it's not ideal for him, but not terrible. And Maverick, I think, was also in the top 10. So, I tell you what, like, jump back a couple of years, and we're saying Aprilia had a terrible weekend, they're struggling all weekend, and they got a double top 10. You know, it was still not a terrible weekend, just that it was a terrible weekend, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It wasn't a KTM weekend. It wasn't a other 3 Yamahas weekend. It was just, they were missing a little bit of summer. They couldn't really compete, but they picked up some decent points, so fair play to them. And it's just good to see. It's really nice to see both riders doing well now. This is like 3 or 4 weekends now we've seen Maverick there. I think we can say that we can expect him there every weekend now. So I'm happy to see that it's not just Aleix carrying the flag anymore. Both the Aprilias are there and looking good.
Yeah, it raises an interesting question going forward. Who do they, like, all along it was Aleix's bike. It was everything Aleix wanted. It was his bike because he was the only one who could get it to that limit. Now they have a proven GP race winner or world champion in his own respect. Are they going to tend to more Mavericks issues? Are they going to tend towards Aleix's? It's going to be an interesting kind of couple of months coming for Aprilia going forward, and they are very, very good friends in that team. And I wonder, will it get a bit sour if, we'll say, development went a little bit towards Maverick and just took away a bit of the edge from Aprilia's kind of eye on Aleix as our golden boy. It's interesting to see now with Maverick. We always thought that Maverick is a quicker rider, but would he be able to get as to the limit that Aleix has got? We always believed if you give them kind of equal package, you believe that Maverick is just a better rider overall. He's a higher ceiling, you could say. But currently, they look very even. Probably, at the moment, with the injury to Aleix, you just say Maverick's slightly quicker, but Aleix has more experience with that bike with the team. Seems to manage more situations at once and get them better. And that's kind of how he ended up with such a decent race today compared to his teammate. But moving on now to someone who had one of the best races of their career, his words, not mine, Fabio Quartararo. What did you make of the Frenchman in Ducati territory?
Just another Quartararo masterclass, really. To be honest, he's pretty good at Austria. It does come up every single time that they get to Austria that, oh, this is terrible for the Yamaha, but actually over one lap, the Yamaha's pretty good at Austria. It's just in a race situation it's not, because it gets passed on the straights by the Ducatis. But Quartararo's got it on the podium once, like before there, he got on the podium there in 2019. Rossi's put it on the podium there as well. So it has been proven that it's also worth noting, I think Rossi was fourth to Quartararo that time in 2019 as well. So it is worth noting that the Yamaha, if you can get clean air and not get battling with a ton of Ducatis, you can do well on it. But he started off a bit slow. He kind of rectified his mistake from Silverstone, which I think was the tyre choice ultimately, because really Silverstone would be a race we expected him to win, and he was like 8th. And then this would be a race we expected him to be 8th, but he was 2nd. So Fabio just showing once again that he can break our expectations. But like I say, the Yamaha is not quite as bad at Austria as everybody makes out it is when you've got a good rider on it and they've got clean air. But I think it definitely helped him that the Ducatis kind of imploded. Obviously, he passed Bastianini before Bastianini had his issue, or maybe as it was starting to happen. But that was just because Martin and Bastianini were battling. And then obviously Martin made his mistake himself, so that also allowed Quartararo through. But then Quartararo, that pass on Jack Miller was unbelievable. How he sort of went around the outside of that chicane. No one had really pulled a pass there all weekend. They'd done it on the way in and perhaps got a run on the way out and passed. But no one had flipped it underneath. And that was a proper Yamaha, Valentino Rossi kind of pass. You know, sort of gas it in the middle of the chicane, dive on the inside the other guy. And then Quartararo expertly blocked off the exit off Miller, Martin was smoking that rear tyre trying to get past him. And then again, Fabio just so deep on the brakes, again, sort of cuts people's line. He knows how to race that Yamaha. Because he's so good on the brakes, that's what makes a difference, really, in the race trim. I think if the other riders could brake as late as he could on the Yamaha, they could probably do a bit better in the races. But honestly, another great race, like Mugello, like other previous Austria races we've seen. Just, he knows how to get the most out of that bike. It is strange how the tracks you expect him to do well, he struggles sometimes, but I tell you what, you can't really deny that. And a couple more laps, he could have been all over the back of Bagnaia in that one.
Yeah, like he did so well that you start to think to yourself, like, how is this guy getting that machine where no one else can ride it? How is he getting it that close, and how is he able to pass Ducatis? And okay, he did get a bit lucky with Jorge Martin running on. Miller looked like he was labouring a small bit, but like, he had no right to pass Jack in that chicane. All weekend, nobody even had looked at that, and he just carried 5-6 mile an hour more into the corner, just ran the bike deep, just sat Jack up, beautiful move, and then as well, did it so cleanly that he managed to get to the next right-hander before the two Ducatis that were jumping out just came behind. He is a hugely special talent, and I have to admit that I didn't rate him as much as everyone did up until this year. I thought last year he threw away the Jerez race, the Catalunya race. He had issues.
Throw away Jerez. He did that.
I'm sorry, he lost that because of issues. He couldn't get him across the line. Is more the point of I was going for.
He just decided, I'm going to make my own.
Yeah, I'm going to just squeeze this to death. But there was still issues there. He wasn't fully complete. And when he won the title, everyone was like, well, it's Pecco. Like, it's Pecco. Then this year, coming into the season, it was everyone, including me, was like, Pecco's championship. You better not even show up because there's no point. Pecco's going to win this one. With a few people going, oh, well, Mark is back now. Give him a full year against these. He's probably still 1 or 2% better. Probably can kind of get the mental games going and beat them. Marquez disappears. Pecco crashes. And then you're like, okay, yeah, Fabio again. But the races that Fabio is putting in against them Ducatis is nothing, just absolutely nothing different to what Rossi did when he was on the bike. He just had such an ability to get the maximum out of the bike, even with the disadvantage of the lack of rear grip, not the amazing aero that the Ducati or the Aprilia has, not the massive top speed. You just have to say that it's Fabio that's winning that championship, not Yamaha, and you have to tip your hat at him to really. But we are going to move on now to Pecco. He wins again, third race win in a row for the first time since 2008. You can all guess who that was. Casey Stoner, who's the last one to win 3 races for Ducati. Is it still too little too late for Pecco winning the title after we go to Austria, one of Yamaha's weakest tracks, and Fabio finishes 0.4 behind him?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It is tough to say. I ruled Bagnaia out a while ago, and he's kind of had a really good run of late, and it does feel very reminiscent of last season. But I feel like Fabio has his mind more together than he did last season. He's not going to allow there to be several races where he struggles. Right, he probably goes into Aragon knowing, right, probably 8th place this weekend. That's what he gets. But Misano, he knows, I could win this weekend. He genuinely could. I know he didn't win there last year, but he almost beat Bagnaia in one of them, and then he started basically last in the other one. So it's very possible. Misano, bit of a Yamaha track. Yes, of course, Bagnaia being the Rossi rider basically lives at Misano, so of course he's got a bit of an advantage. Ducati basically also live at Misano, so everything's in his favour. But we've seen Quartararo go there before, that battle with Marquez back in 2019. You know, again, like finishing second to Bagnaia. So it is tough to say about Bagnaia. He's still quite far behind. He's still mistake prone. I mean, to be honest, I reckon if there was probably more laps to go and Fabio started closing on him like that, he probably would have crashed today. To be honest, I wouldn't have been surprised because he knows he has to win now. He can't lose to. He can't make a mistake. He does know that, but he also can't really afford to ever lose to Quartararo again. So I feel like if it came to it, he's a bit more liable to chuck it up the scenery. I think he's probably still out of it, but it depends how the flyaway races go, I suppose. I mean, you think Motegi, stop-start, that's a Ducati trait. Chang, stop-start, that's a Ducati trait. Phillip Island will be interesting because they were always terrible there, but now it seems like they can turn. They won at Assen, of course, so I don't know. I think these flyaways could be really important because we haven't been there for so long. The bikes are so different from when we last went there. You can't look at that. You can't say, "Oh, Quartararo did really well there." Well, I know I've just said that in 2019 did well at Misano, but we've seen that that's still the case since. Whereas you can't really look at Chang and say, "Oh, he was really good there," because that was so long ago. We haven't been there for years. Same with some of the other ones. We've got Malaysia as well. Malaysia was always a Yamaha track, so I don't know. I think the flyways can be quite crucial in this. I know I've not really mentioned Banyai himself very much in that, but it is more about which bike is better at each track rather than the rider, because they're all very good riders. It's not like Banyai's going to turn up one weekend and think, "Oh, I'm going to actually be good this weekend," or "Oh, I don't feel like it." It's going to be whether the Yamaha works well at the track or whether the Ducati works well at the track. So, yeah, I think he's still sort of out of it, but the flyaways could be crucial. If he wins all the flyaways and Quartararo's nowhere because they're all stop starts, then he could still win the championship, I suppose.
Yeah, anything can happen really in live sport. It is the old cliche that it's not over till it's over, and again, it's just at any moment, at any given race, it can happen. They can have mechanicals. Like we seen today, Leish couldn't get the whole shot device down on the grid, cost them early in the race. All it takes is Brad Binder had his whole shot device stick on for the whole of the Mandalika Grand Prix. Something similar could happen to Fabio. He might have to be pulled in. He might get black flag for a bike kind of condition.
He might undo his suit again.
Yeah, exactly. He might try and ride naked.
I think Martin had a problem with his suit actually today. I saw that on Twitter that apparently something happened to his zip.
Really?
But they didn't notice it on the broadcast or anything. But I think his zip was I could be wrong, but I did see something on Twitter about that. So that is worth noting. Sorry to step over you there, but I just thought of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Again, I didn't hear anything or see anything about it, and considering he crashed as well, that is a bit scary. And he is a fellow Alpine stars, and they have that kind of new little tab over the zip since the Catalunya race of Fabio. But you make very good points that we haven't been to many of the flyaway tracks, and how will Michelin hang on there? The whole shot devices, the wings. We might go to tracks where Michelin don't have the tire for the race, and we might have some weird you must use this race tire, or we might have a shortened race distance. You never know what's going to happen. You go to Asia, bang, weather. How many times have we seen?
They might bring the Mandalika tire to Chang or
you
Phillip
just don't know.
They are so tire.
The heat, the humidity, new bikes, like you say, there's never been such a jump in technology in the last 3 years as there has been in the GP class since the turn of 500s, really, you could say. So there's just so many. If I was Fabio going to the flyaways, I'd be going, well, I just need to get through these. I can't rest yet. It's not done, and it isn't. And the Ducati usually will it will work well in Chang, you'd imagine. It's a stop-starty track. It has a bit of flow in some sectors, but it's the home straight, and then they have the first corner, and then you have a massive straight. That is
another massive straight.
Yeah, then you'd have Ducati written all over him. That's just pain for Fabio. No matter how good he is at the rest of the track, he will be passed by turn 4 no matter how quick he is. It's a fact to this point. So
yeah.
Again, Malaysia, Sepang has 2 massive straights. You could call another 3 or 4 straights in there. So it's always been a Yamaha track, but now that Ducati are so good, you could throw it towards Pecco. We don't know. There's so many question marks going forward, and that will keep the championship interesting because Quartararo is riding better than anyone else. He unfortunately has the handicap of the Yamaha not being the best bike on the grid, but it makes it interesting. But we move forward now. We have 2 weeks until Misano. Who do you think will be strong there, and who do you think will be a little off the pace?
Well, to be honest, I think the Quartararo was strong there. Like I said, I think he'll go well there. Bagnaia got to be strong there. Obviously he's good at the circuit. We've seen in 2021, he led both races. Obviously, he did fall out of the second one, but he was at least leading. 2020, he also crashed out of the lead at Misano, so that doesn't look particularly good for him. But even still, he was in the lead. So, and 2020 was not really a season where we thought, "Oh, Bagnaia, he's going to be amazing." We didn't really expect him to be on the factory Ducati the next season. Going into that season, the only reason that happened was because of the Dovizioso situation. So back then he was still developing, but that was his first real sort of good performance, I suppose you could say. So it's definitely a track that'll work well for Bagnaia. So both the top guys. Aleix, I'm not sure about, because I guess we haven't really seen this good Aprilia there. I can't remember what happened to him last year at that circuit. It probably will work there. You can kind of look at tracks that work well for the Yamaha in the past, seem to work well for the Aprilia now. So I'd imagine that it would be pretty strong there. So all three title contenders could be quite good. Who else is? But I would Marini. You know what? To be fair, shout out to Marini for today. He finished P4, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, P4.
So what performance from him? Bezzecchi as well. But I guess maybe Morbidelli might take a step up. I really doubt it, but he could be there. I know I've just listed basically half the grid because you're asking me who's going to be strong. I tell you who will probably not be too strong, Dovi, unless he does a Rossi and then puts it in the top 10 randomly at his final race. I wouldn't be too surprised. Yeah. But I imagine he's going to struggle there because he did last year there. So yeah, really anybody could win a Misano according to me. But I think, to be honest, I think it's probably going to be between Bagnaia and Quartararo there for the win.
I'm going to put it down to the two Aprilias, the two factory Ducatis, and Pecco.
He is one of them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Fabio. So I don't really see anyone else. I don't see Suzuki's. I don't see Honda's even been at the right track.
Yeah, they may as well not turn up.
Yeah, they might as well just go straight to Aragon and do like 2 weeks of testing.
Where was the top Honda today? Actually, I have no idea. That's how low down they were.
They were. It was P.
Crashed, that's all I know.
Yeah, he was P16 when he crashed. He was out of the points when he crashed. So yeah, and he apparently is keeping his seat for next year. So that's just an interesting one, really. It looks like Igor wants to stay in Moto2 regardless if he wins the title or not.
Marquez wants Nakagami to stay too. He said I think he wants some stability in the team.
Stability?
But do you want he's like, the bike's rubbish, so I'll get my brother off it, but I'll
exactly. Like, I don't know how good of a development rider Nakagami is, but he crashes and crashes and crashes. And then he shows a bit of pace and crashes again, so I don't really know.
That was to test the strength then.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be good for Marquez because he chucks it up the road in a lot of the practice sessions. Perhaps that's why he wants to keep him.
Keep the parts bill high.
Yeah.
But that is it for today. We will be back a week after next for the Misano round 14 of the championship. I hope you have enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, if you could drop a like on the YouTube side, if you are watching or listening, I should say, on Spotify, if you could leave us a 5-star review, it really helps out with getting us out there on that platform. But once again, we have been Motogp Xtra, and we shall see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.